Yo, what's up, guys? It's Jackline here again today with another video. This one's going to be a little different just because I'm going to be going over something in Touchdesigner that I've been grinding on recently. This patch in particular is just going to be focused on building a sort of basic movie sequencer in Touchdesigner. So if you're like me and maybe you can't afford something like After Effects and like Adobe subscription, this might be a good alternative because Touchdesigner is a free software to use commercially or non-commercially, sorry, and for educational purposes. So, if you're just trying to learn or if you're an artist and you're just trying to make like some promo and you're not making like bucks off of it, then Touchdesigner might be right for you. The only thing is it's node based, so we have to do a little bit of sort of hacking around to get it to behave the way we want it to. So in Touchdesigner, we have this nice timeline where we can specify the end in frames as well as a few other things like the frames per second. So in this example, I've built this movie sequencer that is basically playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips one after the other. This is some promo I made with my friend Alchemy when we released our track The Oracle recently. Now, I'm not going to go over how to do the audio analysis or do any of the post processing because those are things I learned from other tutorials. This will hopefully kind of bring a fresh perspective to a lot of you current Touchdesigner users and maybe some people who are looking for something new to try and are thinking about getting into Touch. So hopefully this is useful. But let's just jump right into it. Let me show you first of all what this looks like. This is an example of what I did with it. So, you can see this video ends here and this one up here begins, right? So basically the idea is this movie's going to play, and then when it ends, this movie is going to play, and then when it ends, and so on, okay? So we're using all of this here to calculate the length of each movie clip, and as a result of that, what time each of them will begin. And then we're putting those into tables and using Python and yada, yada, yada. So let's just jump right into it. So here we have a blank network. And we're going to just start with a movie file in, followed by a comp and a null. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, why don't we create another movie file in just to get this comp to stop complaining for now. All right, what I want to do is drop a chop in here, or sorry, a constant chop. And with this, we're going to use a Python expression, and we're going to call it me.time.rate. Okay, so now what this command is letting us do is look at the project's time. Well, sorry, rather this time, it's referencing all of this stuff, and then it's looking at the rate, which is frame rate. You would think it might be FPS, but it's actually .rate. Okay, so what if we want to access the rate of an actual movie file? So I prepared some short clips of myself doing quirky things, just counting with my fingers and stuff. And what I can do is I can say OP, parentheses, quotations, movie file in 1 dot rate. Okay, and now it's telling me 30. And it's saying 30 because this movie's frame rate is 30. Now, most of my movies, it's like Apple, QuickTime, I guess, they're all like 30 frames per second. I don't know if I have any 60 frames per second, but you're going to see why this is important later on, but you're going to want to use movie files that are all the same frame rate for this project. So just a disclaimer before we move forward, okay? In the future, I may try and think of a more clever way to make this more versatile, but for now, this is what I came up with. So we're going to start with this, and then we're going to go and create an info chop and then connect that to a math. and then that's going to go out to a null. Oh yeah, one more thing. This should be over. And we're going to set these moviefileins to their extend right behavior to 0. Now that we have this info, I'm going to go ahead and connect this moviefilein by just dragging and dropping over the top. And we get a lot of different bunch of info, but all we're really interested in is the time, and actually the rate more specifically. So to get that, we're going to look at length, sample, rate, and then we're going to actually divide these by actually combining channels. All right. So I believe this is getting us the length in frames now. And we're just going to connect that. Move this over. We're just going to connect that to a merge. All right, and so now that I have this set up, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one and copy all of this. All right, and with this second movie file, I'm just going to grab my little bit longer movie here. So we'll start with these two. And whenever we create a new movie file, we're going to want to connect these nulls to the merge, like so. Okay, and then whatever order these are in, determine the order in which they play on the timeline, okay? One more thing to note is this movie file in needs to connect to the comp. Sometimes you might see me use something like a fit or transform. Really, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. Anything to make your composite look good, it's kind of beyond the scope of this video. So I'm not going to get into that much further, but those settings in the comp and everything, how to connect it, is necessary to know. All right, so now we move on to the actual part of the patch, or sorry, been using Max a lot, that part of the network that actually calculates all this length and beginnings and stuff. So we're just going to start with the empty table dat. And in this, we're just going to say length. And then right below that, we're going to use a chop to dat. And then I believe if we just drag this over, that should work. Now we need to change a few things. And the output should be rows per column. And then connect that to a merge. All right, so the length goes in. Make sure the length is atop the chop to. That's pretty critical because as you can see, it's going to append the length or prepend the length to the beginning of this table. Now, the next thing we need to do is create a dat2. And here we're going to look at this merge too. And our output is going to be single channel. We're going to say the first row is names and the first column is values. Okay, so as we add more movies, you'll see more like zigzagging, and that's basically just showing you, I think, like all the different lengths of the movie. Since we only have two, it's just a straight linear curve, or no, not even a curve, just a straight line. Moving on, we have this connecting to a math. And then that's going to go into a speed. And then we're going to connect this again to another math over here. And we'll stop there for now and we'll actually start working on these. So the math is going to have a Python expression in this multiplier. Now that Python expression is going to be me.time.rate. And that's because this math is going to look at this frames per second whenever it changes. So I don't actually know how this part of the network works too well because I had to get some help from the Facebook group for Touchdesigner. So thank you to whoever helped me with that. but I wish I could explain more how this works. I think that it has something to do with calculus, but I'm not really too sure. Basically, the purpose of this is going to be to take all these different lengths and do a calculation that outputs the beginning time for each of them. So it's going to say if this one starts at 0 seconds and ends at 30 seconds, then we know the beginning time for the next one is 30. So that's not such an easy thing to do when you have multiple different length video clips. So this is just a basic video sequencer that takes the beginning of them and the end of them and then appends them to each other. So yeah, like I said, in the future I might make it more sophisticated, but for now this is what we get. So enough rambling about that. This is going to be me.time.rate, and this is going to be set to, actually, we're just going to turn the time slice off. And that's it for the speed. Now, I just want to show you guys what it looks like if we were to add a third video, because I think that would really help to demonstrate this. So we'll just use the same video. Like, it doesn't really matter. Oh, wait. Just want this one. Okay, so our thing is not finished, so it's not going to play anything once it's through. But if you look now, we have like this steep slope. Now, watch what happens if I change this. Okay, so I got this cool like germy looking thing. And as you can see now, this looks a lot different because this third one's a lot longer of a video. So this is the length of the first video, and then it gets a little bit longer, and then yeah, so this one's the longest. It's going to draw straight lines between those. And then, yeah, we're performing math based off of the frames per second, and then doing something with this speed, which gives us, ultimately, if we add these two together by combining channels. So I made a mistake. What we actually want to do is combine chops and then select add. Okay, so then we're going to drop this onto this chop 2 basically, and it's going to create our little table of beginning time. So this tells us that the first clip ends at 43 seconds, and then after the second clip ends, the total time would be 126 seconds before the next one starts, and so on. Okay, so moving on from there, we're going to create a blank table, and we're going to want exact dimensions for this one. For columns, we want, 1, and then for rows, we want 2. Yeah, that's what we want. So this one is going to start by saying beginning, and then we're going to put a 0 right below that. Okay, so now we bring out a merge, and first we're going to connect this table, and then we're going to connect the chop 2. Nice and easy. So next thing we're going to want to do is add another merge. So this merge is going to go here, and I'll drop it a little lower because we need to reach back all the way over here and grab this merge and make that the second input. Okay, so I just did a little bit of organizing just to keep things a little bit more clean. So now it's a little bit nicer just to look at. Okay, so this merge is going to go into this merge, yeah, like we said. Now, the thing about this is we need to actually append columns. And that's going to give us one column with our beginning times and another with our lengths. All right, now we're just going to connect that to a null. All right, now we're going to select a dat2 chop, and then we're going to use this merge for. So specify it up here in the dat2 section, or dat section. And then we're going to select columns by index. And the start column index is going to be 1. Keep this as it is. First row is ignored. And then the first column is values. All right, and now connect that to a math. And this math is going to combine channels by adding that will go into this total. That will go into a null. Okay, so now we're going to add a timer chop. Now, the timer chop is a pretty complex operator, as you probably know most of them are, but with this one in particular, it took me a little while to wrap my head around it. So it's worth exploring in the snippets. So if you go to help operator snippets, this little helper window pops up, kind of like in Max. And if you go to timer, they have like a lot of really cool examples. And what I think I was looking for was this, I'm on timer, movie sequencer. This one's really cool because it not only sequences movies, but it overlaps the beginnings and the ends and sort of crossfades them. And, you know, you can kind of see that happening. So as well, you got this nice like timeline thing to play with. And I just looked at it for a little bit. It was a little complicated, so I didn't really have time to implement more flexibility into my network, but there's definitely a lot of good stuff to glean from the snippets. So I'm gonna move this over just a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna put it up here, and we're gonna use this callback DAT right below. So if we toggle it out with this, we can edit it. So shout out to Matthew Reagan. He helped me out on the forums with this, and I'm sort of new to Python. I'm learning it, but it's really exciting what you can do with it. So if we go inside of the callback, we can hit this plus icon so we start editing it, or we can select it and just click A. And I'm gonna make some space here and say if segment equals segment semicolon, then we're gonna say the OP called a string of movie file in, and we're going to do a thing called string concatenation. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, we'll do it for you. Segment plus 1. So we're saying if segment equals segment, then we're going to look at the operator that is equal to whatever segment we're on by the index. And then we're going to say we want you to look at its parameters, find reload pulse, and pulse it. So that's what this looks like. And then we need an else statement that says else pass. And it's simple as that. So what this is going to do, well, before I explain that, let me go back in here and tell you what to activate. So what we need is time control. So we need to lock that to the timeline. We need to specify our segment stat, which is going to be our null here, null 5. And then we're going to go to this output tab and then go to timer fraction, turn that off. Timer count is going to be seconds. Segment, we can turn that on. And then the segment pulse, we can also turn that on. Although I don't think I'm using it in the patch, but I just want to make sure. So then find the sample rate. Now this is going to be, we want this to be equal to the frame rate. So let's keep that as it is. And that should be good for the timer. So yeah, what this is going to do is, if you see this segment, this is going to say for like whatever segment we're on, then we want you to look at the current movie file in that should be playing and then pulse it to restart. So yeah, that's how that's supposed to work. So we're going to see that in action later. But the way this timer is going to work is by referencing this null, and this is going to contain like all the values for the movies and everything. Right now it's bugging out. I don't know why, but it's all there. And this is telling the timer exactly how to work. So we spent a lot of time and effort formatting this just to make this timer work so that we could send these Python commands to the movie file. And so pretty clever implementation, I must say, for Touchdesigner to allow you to do that. So kudos to them for making anything possible, it seems. So moving on, I'm going to explain how we're going to finish this and then some cool things we can do. So shout out Matthew Reagan. He makes great videos. Wouldn't have been able to finish this without him. Really great guy. So go check him out. This null is actually going to be our total time in seconds. So that's just useful to know. So if I were to delete one of these, then yeah, we only have 126 seconds. Or wait, that's not right. 126 frames. No, that's not right either. Ah, okay, I must point this out. This is really crucial. Right here, I misspelled sample rate. So that has to be sample rate. Sorry about that mistake, everybody. Now the calculations should be correct. Okay, so if you're seeing this error right now, I believe that's going to be fixed later. So for now, just leave that alone. But anyway, this now should represent our total time in seconds of all of the movie file ins that we have. And what we want to do with this math is go over to the multiply and input this Python expression, OP, parentheses, movie file in, we're just going to say 1 because it'll probably always be there, dot rate. Now this is where sort of the limitations of this network come into play. You can clearly see I'm only referencing one movie file, so maybe in the future I'll make it sort of dynamically shift FPS, but I have a feeling that might not be very efficient. So I don't know. Well, I'll figure something out eventually, but for now it's very crucial that you keep every movie file the same frame rate to make this work. All right, so now that I've belabored that point, I can move on, and we're going to call this null the total time in frames. Total time frames, right? Because we're looking at the frame rate and we're multiplying it times the seconds. If it's 30 frames per second, multiply 30 times whatever. So anyway, moving on, I'm just going to create this timeline chop just so we have some things to look at. And for this, we're going to turn on rate and play. So this will tell us our frame rate and which frame we're on, which, like I said, we're not going to use, but it's just nice to have that. This is going to be a merge. So let me just look for merge. And what we want now is a constant. And the constant is going to say me.time.rate. Okay, and then that's going to go into the second input of the merge. Nice, so now we need a chop execute dat and put that right below here. So why don't we go ahead, we'll call this one timeline callbacks, or let's just call it timeline calls. So I'll copy that for now. And now we're going to look at this chop execute. So go ahead and make it viewer active. And this is the last Python thing we're going to do in here before I think we're done. And then we're going to get into some more of the fun stuff with this. So this is going to say on value change. Make some space for ourselves. We're going to reference the root dot time dot end. Okay, so now we're going to say, let's look at this and get this, or yeah, look at that or whatever. But what we want to do with that is actually say equals operator timeline calls, and then square brackets will say chan1. All right, so now I'm gonna copy that, paste it, and what we're gonna do is go over to this and say range capital EN. So just like this. Okay. So we're referencing now this R end, which is the range end. And then we're going to set that equal to OP timeline calls chan1. Okay, so we're basically saying make the timelines total length equal to the total length of all the movie clips combined. And the last one is going to be root.time.rate. Set that equal to OP timeline calls. And we're going to say chan2 for this one. All right, and that's it. Oh yeah, and if we want to get the rate of other movie file ins, we just go to the constant and change it from movie file 1 to movie file 2 or whatever. And now it'll connect to that one. All right, so we have a little glitch in our network. Okay, so what I notice is that this stuff is not being affected. So I think what I need to do is go back into this chop execute and figure out what's going on there. So I forgot something crucial. So what I need to do here is actually specify which chop I want to reference. So we're going to go here and say timeline calls. Okay, and I'm going to skip to the end here. Okay, so I just did some digging around and I found the issue and why this won't work. And it's actually pretty simple. So thankfully, we can just go to this constant 3 that I've created here and say moviefilein 1.rate. And boom, there we go. So you see the FPS changes and now our timeline and everything should be right. So let me connect this here. Yeah, that seems right. So let's try actually using this one, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can see this first one isn't as long as the second one. So this means you can see actually the ending has changed, like the length of it. So the frames per second is going to be mapped to this first movie file in. So that's why everything else, it's kind of important that everything's the same frame rate. So if that's the case, then you can just add more movies like this, as long as you remember to connect the merge here and this movie file. So, whoa, something wrong just happened. Oh yeah, shit. So I accidentally inputted way too much. So now once this cycles through, it should be fixed. Let's verify that. Okay, oh yeah, so I need to plug this into the comp, of course. So yeah, now you can start experimenting with like adding more cool videos. Like let's pick something like this. And like this. And then we'll keep the last one the same. So then like what you could do from here is, you know, add an animation comp. And then what you have here, if you click on edit animation, is basically a keyframe editor for whatever you want. Now I'm not going to go into how this works. I kind of think I showed you in the beginning how I had mine set up, but there's other tutorials on that. Billiam Seppi, I think, has a good one. That's where I learned how to use this from. And I think Matthew Reagan also has a good one. So if you learn how to use the animation comp, that's like a really powerful tool. Or you could do like procedural things like with LFOs and stuff. But what I like to do is watch tutorials by a lot of those guys and many others and sort of just build these abstractions, which I might make a video on another time. It's very easy though, but I might like make an effect and save it in my components. And like, let's just do like feedback edge as an example. So plug that in here and then go into the null. And now I can sort of animate this like so. If I go to edit, let's just say T, just have one channel. And I always have to like remember how to use this, but like, let me just make something like this. And then I think what I gotta do is export this. So I go null. And if you want to do math, you can do all that stuff and use select and whatnot. But I'm assuming most of you already sort of know how to animate. So I'm not gonna explain too much about that. But you know, like I could, excuse me, I could export it, and now it's gonna follow the animation curve. It's going a little bit slow right now, which is why I'm showing you this way. But yeah, this just give you an idea of like how you could use this. So like you could basically animate clip by clip everything you want. So this is sort of a long movie, so it's gonna go on for a while, you can see. But we'll go ahead and wait for that a little bit. I don't want to like click around too much because like I said, this is sort of an unstable experimental network, but this should get the job done if you have the patience to hack it. I think it's about to change clips. Let's look at the segment. Yeah, normally what you have to do is like let it restart. So like it's always a good idea to click on the end here and let it recycle through. That way all the timing and everything lines up. So let me go back to, let me close this. Just make sure everything works right. Let's go back here and yeah, we'll select our nice and short movies. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. And then for this one, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, cool. So everything should be working. Like if it's buggy, just try to click on the end and let it cycle through because sometimes it needs to sort of refresh like that. So there you go. That's it. I'm really happy to present this because this is my first Touchdesigner tutorial. I really hope this is helpful for somebody. And yeah, stay tuned for more. This has been Jack Lyon signing off.